Peace and blessings. Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about the aspects of marketing that we haven't talked about. Obviously, everything in this world has a story, including the fact that my hair and facial hair have undergone great transformations in these videos. At the time of recording these videos, I was blessed to have a daughter while I was recording these videos, and she didn't like my beard when I was trying to burp her. And so I had to shave. And that's kind of how we had such drastic changes in the middle of recording. But anyways, back to the lesson plan about digital marketing. But I thought I would share that beautiful news with you. As we talked about throughout the course, one of the key aspects to this work is figuring out all your pieces to your puzzle, right? When we look at the big picture of marketing, we've gone through the majority of this, but there are certain aspects that we still haven't touched on. So those include email marketing, some ideas, brief ideas about how sales funnels work, especially in thinking about where you're finding people that are interested in your brand or who will buy your products, right? The other components that we've touched on, like SEO, and then one that's not on this document is actually influencer marketing, which is so important today and playing a big role in how we reach people when algorithms have shifted so much that we have to basically use people with big personal channels to get our brands in front of people. So email marketing, right? One of the most important things that you can build out, as some people have said very explicitly, you will always gain more from growing a list than growing a following. A lot of people don't understand what petition-based platforms really do, right? When you sign a petition, what does that do? Ultimately, those petition-based platforms are list building for community power-based organizations. They're really they're gathering data on you to help move an issue. Of course, those numbers that they get within the petitions help to show the true power behind the thing, but ultimately it's about them growing their membership and growing connectedness to you. And so that's why some of these organizations like MoveOn.org, Empower Change, they're really amazing community organizations, but most people don't really get what it is that they're doing and how they build power, which is all about email marketing. It's about the way that they write emails. It's about the style in which they write emails that get people to read. It's about excellent copy, excellent headlines, constantly doing A/B testing. If you want to know organizations that spend all their time on emails, it's these campaign-based digital organizations. And the reason for that is people would say, well, why don't they spend time with everything that I've been talking about in this course? Why don't they spend time on video? Why don't they spend time on social media? And of course they do those things. Like MoveOn was actually one of the sponsors of our video, A Prayer Beyond Borders, but that's not the majority of what they do. And there's a really easy way to understand that, right? Is that how do consumers want to receive messages from brands? When most people go on Facebook, they're trying to connect with family. They're trying to connect with friends. They're not necessarily on social media trying to connect with you as a company. Whereas in email, I think people, for whatever reason, the way that email is structured, the way that we imagine it as a form of work rather than a form of leisure, which is what social media originally was thought of, we are more comfortable getting brand-based emails. And so look at the difference in this data, right, of how consumers want to receive promotional messages. 60% in email versus 20% from social media. And then if you look at, and the big thing here, and again, the reason why those petition-based platforms, as an example, the reason why e-commerce companies, as an example, the reason why everybody is constantly begging you for your email, the reason why I downloaded a whole bunch of reports from all of these great marketing companies to put in this course so that you didn't have to sign up for their email list and get all of their emails trying to sell you things nonstop. You know, people all use those funnels to get your email. So people will give you an entire book. Oh, you want this book on digital marketing? Give us your email. You know, give us as much information about you as possible. You hope that obviously they're not trying to sell that information. In most cases, they're just trying to sell you their products. But look at the difference in engagement, right? 22% for an average company. And when you're a community-based organization or a nonprofit, generally those rates will be even higher, email open rates, because people think that you're not trying to sell them anything. Although, of course, you're asking for their donations, you're still trying to sell them something. You're trying to sell them your brand. You're trying to sell them your work, versus now 0.58% engagement on social media, friend. So why organizations don't understand how important email is beyond me, right? Of course, I go and talk about social media first because you're all expecting me to talk about social media. But email, if I've learned anything in this work, it's that you build your lists and build your email lists. And in long term, if you had 100,000 emails, let's just put it simply, right? If you had 100,000 emails and you had a following of 100,000 people on Instagram, what do you think is ultimately worth more money? Look at the data, right? So that means, well, Facebook is an easier algorithm to talk about because how much they've manipulated it. They've manipulated Instagram less so far because of how rapidly that platform's growing still. And part of the reason why it's still growing so rapidly is that they haven't manipulated the algorithm as much, right? If you have 100,000 emails and you get 22% open rate, that means you're actually reaching 22,000 people, right? 22,000 real people will receive your information, will interact with your content. Whereas if you go then 100,000 people, right? And even if it was 1%, that means you would get access to 1,000 of those people, despite all the time you've spent on social media, right? Whereas in some cases, asking for an email, making sure you have these email boxes everywhere on every page of your website, asking people for their email, having pop-up modals, right, is easier in some cases than getting people to follow you. But then it's coming up with a solid email plan and how you're going to engage people. Here's another really good slide on these data preferences, right? If you think about even push notifications, right? Cell phones can drive you crazy because of the notifications. You know, there's a recent documentary about what's wrong with social media, and the big problem with it is our notifications, because the idea of notifications, the idea of likes, the idea of people engaging with your content is what gives you that hit of dopamine. It's what gets you excited. It's what all technologists understand is about getting you to continually engage with their brand, and that's where those notifications come from, right? But again, you see almost 3 times the level of preference for email and even direct mail, right? Direct mail, we're not going to talk much about in this class, but if you have addresses, again, I think I've said this once before, you really can reach people and get them, especially to donate. I'll touch on it a bit in the final course, but those are more likely ways for you to raise money than it is through doing all this work in social media. So really email, direct mail, again, so much stronger in some ways than social media. And most organizations don't spend enough time diving deep into that and understanding these things. And this is why, right? If you look at how people talk about how marketers talk about sales funneling, right? So you have the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the bottom of the funnel. And then you have your brand evangelists, right? If you think about it, social media is really that top of the funnel. It's where you're building your brand awareness, beginning the touch points of your brand engagement. And so all of these parts are actually important, right? And so I'm not dismissing social media, but getting people to the point where you're getting their emails, that's why, the email stage is more around this middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, where people are actually wanting to know you in a deeper way. They're starting to make decisions. And then after, a donation, especially, that's when they become your brand evangelist, right? So thinking of it through a sales funnel helps you understand how important emails actually are in gathering them, because you're getting closer to that finish line of getting a donation from someone, of making a sale, right? Than you will be if all you are, I think once I compared it to dating, that with social media, is more like flirting, right? You're flirting with the person a little bit, you're getting to know them sort of, but with the email engagement, you take things a little bit deeper. You're not married yet, right? Marriage is when you actually make that donation. You're in a real relationship. When you purchase a product from someone, you like, I love coffee. You get that coffee, and I shop for coffee online way too much, like really delicious, beautiful coffees. Natural. I like natural processed coffees. Those are my favorites. But anyway, I become a big brand evangelist for those coffees once I love them, because I'll sit there on my Instagram and take photos of them, and this coffee was so delicious, right? Because that's when you love something. That's when you're in that marriage and love and deep relationship, is once you get to the end, right? But to do that, that's why all these coffee websites are great examples of companies that kill it at e-commerce, right? And so there's one coffee website I go to a lot. It's called Brandywine Coffee. I love that coffee. It's really, really delicious. But every time I go there, they have this really ridiculous game they have an amazing modal. And the modal is this pop-up where it pops up, and it's this game where if you put in your email, the wheel will spin, and you can win like a coffee tumbler, which is like a mug. And I've never won the mug, even though that's what I want. Or you can get 10% off, or you can get buy one, get one free bag, or you can get 20% off. And I mean, man, like having a level of interaction like that for e-commerce, and really e-commerce is where you can see how this stuff works at a really, really high level, especially when you talk about brand sales funneling, especially when you talk about creating different content boxes, and how, e-commerce brands attack you from all sides to get you to make a purchase. Once you've visited once or twice, then you'll be bombarded with ads for them. Like there's this beanbag thing that I was looking at for my wife when she was pregnant, and I have nonstop advertisements from those people. I thought it might be a comfortable way for her to sit, because she was very uncomfortable, right? And just nonstop advertisements just because I went to their Instagram like one time, right? Anyway, so how do you create, and really a baseline for this, a lot of this class, what we're talking about here is how do you create a baseline product to test with your audience. So in my opinion, the best place to start with email is a really strong email newsletter. So coming up with a newsletter that tells a story. Not a lot of organizations will do these emails that are just advertisements. Again, you have to think of email as this idea that if you're telling a story, and again, going back to these brands like MoveOn, you will never see a headline from MoveOn that says, "We really need you to donate right now." I mean, they might in the midst of like an election season or something like that, but generally speaking, they're always going to be something like, "We have to talk about what just happened." What just happened in Iowa, right? Things like that you'll click like, "Oh yeah, I'm really upset about this. I want to know more." So those headlines that are strong headlines that get people to open, right? Again, you have to think about your audience. What will your audience be interested in? And how do you begin to tell a story about that? Consistency here is super key. How do you think, okay, I'm going to do this every 2 weeks. I'm going to do this every month. I was trying to do a newsletter for every week. And like, sometimes I'm way too extra, as you can tell from this course of like all the different links and things that I've been giving you all and bombarding you all with content. And so I was like, I'm going to do an overview of global Muslim life, right? I'm going to find every aspect of it and what's news this week and whatever. That was too big, right? So I had to scale it back, really begin talking about 1 or 2 stories. And so what you do is you have these different boxes and how you design your email newsletter. And in the first box, you have your story. You have the core thing that you're trying to get people to read. And then you go into your advertisements for your programs, for the things that you have coming up, or maybe you tell a second aspect of a story if you have something else that you want to talk about, right? But really, consistency is the key. This is really about developing and showing your organizational expertise. Platforms are super key here for design and building a good following. I really like, a lot of people are writing on Substack right now. It's a really easy place to gain a decent following for your organization, to gather emails. And it's designed in a way where you can put these little modals, these pop-ups throughout your site, throughout your newsletter, to get people to sign up. And the newsletter shares super beautifully on social media, which a lot of newsletters don't. So one of the problems with newsletters, if you're spending all this time writing newsletters and you can't, and the platform you're using doesn't easily share to social media, then you're wasting time, right? Because that's one of the things you should be thinking about with content, is that how do I constantly repurpose what I'm doing, what I'm writing? How do I not reinvent the wheel? So if I'm writing a newsletter, how do I turn it into an article? How do I turn it into a social media post? How do I cut it into pieces and put a photo on it and put it on Instagram? How can I even use aspects of that for like my end of year report that I want to send to my donors, right? So you should constantly be thinking about how do you reuse content. And I think I gave the example of doing live sessions and turning those things into podcasts as a really, and then also video clips. That's a really simple example, but for writing, it's even easier, right? Because you can always cut and paste and put these things in different places. But the issue with platforms like Substack, MailChimp, with MailChimp, it's, if you want to pull your list from anywhere else that you've gathered emails, like say, for instance, you did a really stellar like crowdfunding campaign and you had 1,000 people give to your campaign. Well, obviously you want to take those emails and just dump them into your email platform. But MailChimp can make it super difficult to verify that those emails are yours. And so it won't just let you dump things, right? Whereas some of the other platforms, they will. So you really have to be careful also about where you can put emails that you've gotten from different places besides just your email platform. And then now Gmail is also changing so much that this is super important, right? That the email is algorithmic. Gmail has this promotion tab in individual inboxes, and then it also has a social tab. And if you like I'll just go in, every couple months and delete the entire social tab, because I don't remember when the last time I ever went to my social inbox was. The promotional tab I will look at from time to time, but a lot less, right? Whereas if it gets into your actual home email box, you're much more likely to look at it. And you can begin to tell in your own email what are the strategies people are using to get into your different inboxes. If they're getting into your personal box, look at it. In many cases, those emails will not be designed, right? They won't have photos embedded within them. They'll be plain text. They won't have HTML embedded into the email bodies. They will just be plain text. So there's a platform called Drip that specializes in that, where all they're doing is plain text email and high percentage deliverability into the primary email box, right? If that's something that's super important to you, which obviously it should be, that might be a platform that you look at. Because unfortunately, everything is so complicated with algorithms today, right? So next piece. So highly recommend that you start an email newsletter. Just think of what it's going to be about. Again, think through this idea of what are your content verticals? What are things that you're already working on within your organization, and how do you become an expert on those things? So influencer marketing, if you think about it, influencer marketing has always been around. It's why people have banquets and they invite an influencer, what's now called an influencer. They invite a celebrity, they invite a leader in the field to come and give a speech, because people are more likely to come to that banquet or that talk because of that person, and they're more likely to engage with your organization, right? So there's a few ways we should think about this as organizations, right? One is that micro influencers are all around you all the time. They're people in your community that are leaders and are trusted, right? Simple. Those people, if you can get them to leverage your brand, to talk about your brand, to be brand evangelists, to talk about how much they love you, to talk about your film, to post about you, etc., friends, family, whatever you can get, and especially leaders, micro influencers can be just as important as macro influencers. And you'll see when you can track the virality of articles or films or whatever it may be, you'll see oftentimes that there's, why is that person? Well, why did it take off from that person? Well, people trust that person. People read that person's post, right? So that level, that micro influencer is something that people underthink, right? Whereas macro influencers are people with these large digital followings who will be a champion of your brand. If you can get the really big people to talk about your brand, to record a short video for you, to come on one of your programs, right? Like one of the organizations in this course, What's It? We've seen great success where they've had different speakers come in, especially in the digital realm, and give lectures or have interview sessions. And those lectures and those interviews take off in a way out. Originally, Wasset was just a Seattle-based organization, but now I've grown this national brand by doing programming like that through macro level influencers, right? You can actually pay influencers, and there's entire platforms to pay influencers. You want to double, triple check how effective that is and ask them how it's gone for other organizations. And you really need to figure out what it is you want. Do you want brand growth primarily? Are you trying to sell something? The number one thing here is if you're trying to sell a product, obviously macro influencers can help you move that product. Or, one of the things that works really well in nonprofit communities is you'll have social impact influencers who will champion, different crowdfunding campaigns, and those crowdfunding campaigns can really, really take off. So like all things, make sure you do your research about the influencers and only work with people who you think will actually help you reach your goals. So final piece of this, right? So that was the big marketing overview. And then we'll talk about a couple more parts of marketing, which are SEO. And then also in the next course, we'll talk a little bit about advertising. But now we want to talk about how do you understand your data, right? The baselines for understanding your data is that once you launch, very quickly within the first couple of weeks, if you're consistent about posting content or posting to your social media, you'll be able to get enough level of data feedback. Hopefully, if you're able to get some brand growth, and even if it's 100 people, look at the data for that 100 people, right? Spend the time saying like, okay, well, what's working? Because the question becomes what's working and how do I grow it? A lot of this data-based research on your brand, it's what's called growth hacking. There's some really interesting, great books about the data science behind growth hacking, and essentially it's all algorithmic at that point where you essentially say, okay, well, I have 1,000 people and they're from these communities and they represent X. Well, how do I target those people who are coming to my page within those demographics to grow to 100 times that, right? So there's so much that you can learn even when your audience is small, right? So you should be able to think about what their demographics are. Are they women? Are they men? Who are you appealing to? Like their racial demographics, a little bit more difficult now on social media platforms. You used to really be able to target things, but then obviously that was abused in things like presidential elections, and you mess up democracy, you might get skinnier data, because the reality is that you can do so much with data, and you can do so much with these social media platforms to manipulate people and to do hyper targeting, right? So you go into religion and race and where exactly people live. So there's so much that you can learn about that, right? A big one here is the times that they are online and when they react or interact with your posts. right? What are your open rates on your emails? How quickly are your platforms growing? How quick is your Instagram going, your Facebook, your Twitter? What's the different brand language you're using on each of these, and why is one growing faster than the other? Why is your email list stagnated, or people are unsubscribing from your emails, right? These are all ways to think about your data to go deeper. If you have Google Analytics on your website, you can also do things like see what parts of your website people are interacting with, what pages they're going to, where they're not going to. So you spend all this time building out this website, and the question is, are people even actually looking at all of it? That's something that you can figure out by looking at your analytics, right? So the big thing here is signing your website up for some type of Google Analytics, and then looking at your social media data, right? Which content verticals perform the best? Try to categorize your posts so you can understand this, right? Make sure that you're, again, this idea of content boxes or content buckets. Like this content is this beautiful piece about nature that's a poetry piece or something, right? This is this social justice piece. This is this faith-oriented piece. Those are different content buckets, and you should be able to categorize them and then look at how your audience is interacting with each of these. All right, again, Growth Hacker Marketing. If you want to learn more, you can find so much just by, there's all these different Growth Hacker Marketing websites, and you can go a lot deeper about data and how you move it. So data platforms for research. I look a lot at Google Trends because it's more macro level than what, like, if you look at what's trending on Twitter as an example, Twitter manipulates what's trending a lot, and they're running a lot of advertisements within that. So it's not as honest as it once was. Whereas if you look at Google Trends, you can see the stories that are really taking off, and you can look by country, you can look by language, you can look worldwide. Super fascinating platform to play with and interact with. Obviously, your Google Analytics, super key, but you have to, it takes a little bit of skill to set it up. But with most of these things that have any reality of setting something up, you can find a quick how-to on YouTube, the same way you can find a how-to of how to bake a cake or fix some part of your car, right? Platforms, obviously your social media data dashboard, you should get familiar with all the different data aspects that you can get. Facebook is the most in-depth. Instagram doesn't give you a lot of data at all. Instagram is kind of a weird, kind of closed platform. They don't have an API, which is, they don't allow people to interact with their data in really deep ways. Although on the platform Ninjalytics, you can look at things like growth of Instagram accounts. You can look at average likes. So this is especially good if you're looking for influencer marketing and people to work with, right? Tweet reach is really nice for Twitter data. You can also look and see, like, if you had a hashtag campaign you were working on, or you had a specific set of tweets that you were sending out for your organization, it'll show you how far that reach actually was, how many people it got in front of. Alexa.com is a really amazing platform, not like Amazon Alexa, but Alexa.com, which obviously Amazon owns also. But it's a website research platform that allows you to look at competitor websites and see how much traffic they're getting versus yours. And especially, a good way to think about this as an artist or an institution is that what are the artists that you want to kind of pattern yourself off of, or that you would consider to be very successful within your field? Look at their web traffic and see the level that you need to get to have similar sales that they have, or similar level of clientele. For an organization, look at competitors with larger budgets to think about their web traffic. And if their web traffic isn't big, then they have to be raising money somewhere else, like obviously Foundation World, et cetera. But there's so much that you can learn from looking at competitor websites. Follow.net is just another one of those. BuzzSumo is a way that you can look at what's trending on social media by keyword searches, and that's super fascinating, especially when you're engaged in niche content like Muslim content, Christian content, faith-oriented content, you can just put in those keywords and figure out what the most viral things are day to day. NewsWhip is another social media data platform, really amazing platform, but it's also super expensive to the point now you have to sign up for a trial. You have to basically sign up and talk to them before you can even get a trial, whereas you used to actually be able to get a trial. Tribe Dynamics, another really expensive platform, but it's one that helps you find influencer marketing relationships. Like, how do you get in touch with these people to help them grow your brand, right? So data science, right? I really love data science. Is all about how you look at data. There's this story that I did during the Olympics in 2016, where that platform that I was talking about, NewsWhip, right? They actually said that here are the most, I think they said something like, these are the most viral stories from the 2016 Olympics. But what I realized is that this platform is based in Ireland. Ireland is not hyper diverse. And while it has diversity, maybe it's not as diverse as places like Los Angeles or New York City, right? And they're not, and everything about data is the type of search terms you're using. So what I did is I took their article and then I started searching things like Black women, Olympics, hijabi, Olympics, because this is when Ibtihaj Muhammad was there. There was a number of very viral Muslim athletes at the 2016 Olympics. And what I actually saw is that diverse data, if you just having that, using those diverse data terms, you're able to come up with, wait, these data experts don't even have the correct top 10 stories because they have blind spots in their research and in their data. Whereas if you look at things in a more diverse way, you can actually see what the bigger story is. And generally speaking, part of that is that people don't understand what global audiences actually are, because many people are so nationalistic in their thinking. Like Khabib Nurmagomedov is a perfect example of that, where people don't understand that Khabib is such a big celebrity because of a global Muslim following. They'll use terms like, oh, well, he's big in Russia, or he's big in this region, he's big in the Middle East, but they don't understand that he's actually watched around the world. And with Google Trends on his recent fight, I was actually looking at some of that data in a fascinating way, where you could prove how Muslims can move these key data points, if you look at it correctly, is that if you look at the states in the United States that had the most search terms for Khabib Nurmagomedov, during his last fights, those were in the states that had the largest Muslim populations, or the places with the largest Muslim cities, like Michigan, Florida, California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, right? It was very clear on that map. Most people wouldn't connect those dots with data unless you understand global audiences. Other examples of that are not Muslim examples are like the French-speaking world. Their content, their artists are very deeply interconnected to each other, and they'll have global followings. So someone like Stromae, this amazing French artist, French-speaking artist, is followed all over the world, is beloved all over the French-speaking world. He's one of the, if you look at his YouTube views of his videos, they're like hundreds and hundreds of millions, like more views than Kanye West or the biggest artist in the United States. And that has to do with diasporic French audiences. Or if you look at like Latino America, right? All the ways that Latino America consumes music and culture across their borders because of shared cultural realities, right? But again, you won't understand these things if you don't understand data, and if you don't look at your own data in diverse ways, you won't understand it. Finally, right, is this idea of search engine optimization. Obviously, if you want to go deep with SEO, which a lot of organizations need to, you need to read books about it, or watch entire YouTube video series, take courses on it. But the core points to SEO is that this is why it's really important that you work with developers and and when you're working with people who are building your website from the beginning, you should be asking questions about SEO. Because if they don't design your site in a way where Google and these search engines are basically trolling your data correctly, like imagine like these big fishing boats that troll the bottom of the sea and unfortunately grab all the fishes. That's very much how these search engines are. They troll the internet. And if your website doesn't have the correct architecture, which obviously most people aren't going to understand, then your SEO essentially, then everything I'm talking about keywords, content, etc., won't matter if you don't have the right architecture. So either make sure that you're working with a developer who understands SEO and how to set up your site architecture correctly, or use a website builder like Squarespace or Medium.com to publish your content there. Although, like I said, for organizations, Medium's not good because you can't collect donations. But the key here is content, keywords and content. There's a lot of ways that you can look at Google's SEO keyword searches to see how competitive keywords are, to look at what the top searches are now within those keywords related to your work, related to your organization, related to your locality. But the internet has shifted a lot, and it's a story that unfortunately hasn't been told enough publicly about Imam Omar Suleiman and his work with the Yaqeen Institute, where they actually went to Google and showed how these people, just because they were building their site architecture correctly, they were Islamophobes or had old, irrelevant information about Islam. They were controlling the top 500 searches about Islam and Muslims on the internet. So if whatever people might search, they're going to lead to disinformation or Islamophobic platforms that will continue, chains of misinformation and keep people confused, right? So Imam Omar actually went to Google with his team of all these different people he has working in SEO, and they were able to help Google think about how they look at high quality content rather than just things based on keywords, right? And so now, the Yaqeen Institute is trying to capture those 500 key search terms related to Islam and Muslims by having this big SEO team to make sure that people get access to accurate information about Islam and Muslims. But again, you have to have your solid site architecture and internet databases for people to find you. You have to have great headlines. You have to have good content. All of these things are what matters primarily within SEO. But then you have to understand that there's also these things, even within a Squarespace site, that are about meta titles and meta descriptions that are on the back end of how you're describing an article with all the keywords in that descriptor to make sure that the internet trolling is working correctly. So that is all of the points for this lesson. I hope that was helpful. I know that's, again, marketing is so much. There's so much content in marketing. You could go to so many different places. Really, like I said in some of the earlier lectures, the key is beginning small and begin to get your pieces to your content puzzle right, rather than try to rush through all of these different things, right? So may your media production be fruitful, and may you always be blessed. Peace and blessings.